Hey everyone, welcome, welcome. Um, Hi Jeanette, how are you? It's nice to see you. And Victoria, nice to see you. And Victoria doesn't have to do jury duty. I'm so excited for her. I always dread that when I get that envelope in the mail from jury duty, because you just never know. Um, hey Mary, welcome. Welcome, welcome. Um, all right, so I was going to simply cut out my fabric on the shirt pattern I worked on last week because I'm really excited to make it. But then I thought, no, this is $45 a yard Irish linen, and I didn't want to screw it up. Oh, yay. Jeanette's doing well and staying cool. Well, that's important in Arizona. I hope your mom is well too. All right, so I'm going to stand up and show you here. This is the shirt pattern that I worked on last week, where I cut the sleeves in a little bit and I made a shirt tail hem. You can see my shirt tail hem. It's a very subtle, shirt tail hem. And I feel like it almost covers my bottom. So I think I'm happy with the shape. Now, in fairness, oh, Mary doesn't blame me for... Plus, I want a pattern that I know I can just whip it out and use it. And I don't know what happened. I'm just going to be completely honest with you. Sometimes there's gremlins. Now, I may have had a larger... I think I might have had an inch allowance on my shoulders, which if I pick this up, you can see it also puts my dart in the right spot or closer. But I sewed a little bit less of a seam allowance on my shoulder just to drop the neckline a little bit too. And what that did was it lowered my dart again. So if you look at my dart, you can see it's really below my fullness. It really should be, up a little bit higher, like about here. So it's, in my fullest area. So I'm going to pick up the dart and I'm going to leave my allowances for my shoulders this smaller amount. And that's what I like to fine tune in the end. I don't want to have extra allowances at the shoulder, right? I don't need it. I also added an extra ½ inch here because I was afraid it was going to be too tight, even though the measurement was correct. And you can see it is too loose. So I'm going to take off that extra ½ inch I added there because I clearly don't need it. All right, so that was I was hedging my bets, and I was doing some of the things I recommend to my students not to do, like trust your muslin. But the dart issue is because I made this, I made my seam allowance here less, and so it dropped everything. And as a matter of fact, I might even want to pick up my arm a little bit because you can see it almost touches or shows my my bra. It's almost a little bit too much, and it looks like I need bust room because the dart is too low. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fix all those things, and then I'm going to walk the collar and the collar stand and make sure those match, because obviously I've changed a bunch of things in my neckline at the shoulder, so I want to make sure that all matches. So what we're going to do is we're going to first, let's look at my look at my pattern pieces here for a second. And my back is fine. This is my back. I really like the way my back fits, so I'm happy with the back. Now the front, the first thing we're going to do is pick that dart up a little bit more to get it into position. So I'm just going to make a note here that I'm going to have a, let me see, I'm just going to measure what this is here. I'm just measuring my the shoulder seam. No, I really can't do, hold on one second. Let me go back over here. All right, I'm just gonna measure my shoulder seam. I can't do it like that. Well, you know what? I'm gonna take this off. I don't need to be wearing this. Let me take this off and put my other shirt back on. That way I can work with it and not try to play Twister when I'm trying to figure stuff out here. All right, so let me just put my shirt back on. This has been crazy weather in Connecticut. We opened the pool yesterday and it's much improved. It looked like a brown pond yesterday and we've shocked it so we can almost see the bottom now. But it's cold again today. Like, I feel like every time it gets to be warm and summery, then it cools back off again. All right, so I'm gonna make a note here, and I think this is important. Like, if you make some final decisions, make notes about what they are so you can keep track of what you're doing. So for example, I think at some point up here, I had 1 3/4 inches of an allowance, and I kept, trimming some off or, doing various things and sewing them at different depths. But now I'm gonna make sure I have my final, which I think I sewed it at what I have marked here. Let me see. Yeah, I did. All right, so this is a 3/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, and I think I had a bigger seam allowance on my other muslin. I don't know where I put it right now, but basically I want to make sure I sew that at 3/4 inches because, I also, don't want to have to keep changing this. I want this to stay the same so everything below it fits the same. Oh, Mary says she uses a pencil. That's a good idea, Mary. Pencil is good because then you can erase. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I am going to draw a box around here, and I'm going to move this up again to get it to be in a happy place for me, like this. And I'm going to move it up 3/4 inches because that's when I pleated out and looked at it carefully before I came on. That's how much I needed to lift it up. So let's do that. And I have a tip for you. I was using my rotary cutter, and I don't know if you can see this. I want to get really, really close so you can see this for a second here. I'm going to blow it out so it's really, really bright, and I'm going to make it really, really sharp because I want to show you something. When you're putting your rotary cutter back together, at least this is an OFLA, what I want to show you here is there is a recessed, meaning, see how that's got like a hole, or it's recessed in there, right? And the other side is flat. See how that's flat? I had mine on with the flat side face down like that. And what was happening was I couldn't tighten it down enough to keep the blade from wobbling. And I used that for like a month and a half like that. And I kept trying to tighten it. So if you're having problems after changing a blade, just make sure you put that screw with the recessed part, again, in with the, in against the back of the rotary cutter. And then I tighten it as hard as I can. And then I back it off a little bit, because you want your cutter to be nice and smooth. You don't want the blade wobbling. All right, so that's just a little side tip there. Oh, Mary said, wouldn't it have been easier to just cut a lower neckline? Then the rest would have been in place. Yes, it would have been, Mary, except my neckline where it is now is where I want it. So I think my neckline was jacked up a little bit too high too. But you are right. Like, if my neckline had been perfect, then I could have, I could have just lowered this and I could have left all this up where it was. That is totally true. But I also felt like this was, riding up on my neck a little bit too much. So that's why I lowered the shoulder and fixed the neckline. It's very easy for me just to cut a rectangle around this, and then this is very easy for me just to make a rectangle and hike this up. Right, I know, Mary. Yeah, so Mary is suggesting that I take a bigger seam allowance and pick everything back up. That would fix the problem with my base of this, right? It would pick up my armhole and it would pick this up, except my neckline was choking me. So I just lowered it and I liked it. So Mary's right, you could definitely have taken a bigger seam allowance here, and then lowered this. Like, I could have done that, but then I also would have had to reshape my neckline and my armhole, because lower down it didn't match, like the edges didn't match. So I was fussing with it, and I decided just to sew it a little bit less and to see if it worked, and it did. And then you can see here, this is just really easy. I mean, all you do is just slide this up. So in the big scheme of things, this is a pretty easy adjustment to do. You literally just do this, slide it right up like that, and tape it. But that's what we love about sewing and fitting. There are a lot of ways to get to the same answer, and what you want to do is pick the one that makes sense for your specific situation, or, you know, other things that are going on. But that is another good way to do it, Mary. Okay. All right, so I've got that taken care of. That is lifted up now. And then I'm just going to take a piece of my scrap paper here, and I'm going to just fill that in like this. And now my bust dart will be in the right spot. Let's get this so it's like that. All right, so I'm gonna pick this up here. And let's do this one over here. All right, so now I have fixed my dart, okay? And I'm also going to, since I have to, I'm going to trim off this extra that I added. Remember I told you I added like a little bit because I thought it would be too tight. It's not too tight. So, but before I do that, let me just fold this like this. And I'm going to bring this one up to here, like this. Okay, and then, see, I can use my special tape, right? I love this tape dispenser. And actually, this piece has been just stuck right here. And watch, I can still use it to hold down my dart. Isn't that cool? I love this tape. Love it, love it, love it. And not only is it repositionable, but it's reusable. So if you stick it on the side of your tape dispenser and keep using the same piece over and over again until it loses its stickiness, that will be very thrifty because this tape is expensive. But the good news is this tape is back in stock. So if anyone saw this cool tool and they didn't get it or couldn't get it because it was out of stock, it's back in stock now. So, yay. But Mary's saying, not picking on Jen. She knows I would rather do the sewing than the paper. Oh, Mary, I know you're not picking on me. And honestly, this goes for Mary and everyone else watching. If you're watching me and something occurs to you that I could do it differently, just tell us, because I don't know how to do everything, right? I'm not 100%. you know, all knowing, and you might suggest something and I may say, hey, that's a better idea, or I'll explain why I'm doing it the way I'm doing it. So always feel free to pick on me, because I know you're not picking on me. I love you guys. Oh, Karen. Oh, Karen. All right, so Karen's here. She's in the house. She sent me this, my new, love my tape dispenser. And she sticks her tape on the side. So now that I've talked a little bit, that tape has been sticking on there. Let me just cut this off. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it while it's, you know, taped shut, because I don't need this extra that I thought I needed. And then look it. I could take this tape back off again, right? And I'm just going to keep putting it here until it doesn't work anymore, because this tape is expensive and I want to be able to get as much use out of it as possible. So that's going to stick right there until I'm ready to try using it again. All right, and so since I cut off that little bit there, I'm also going to cut off a similar amount in the back, because I really could have taken it off or sewn deeper front to back here. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark off a similar amount that I trimmed off the front. And I'm going to trim that off of the back as well. So I don't need that much ease. I mean, I want this to be fitted and comfortable. I want there to be enough ease, but I don't want it to be huge. All right, so I think now I've cut off my extras. I've picked up my dart. The only other thing I have to do is make sure the collar matches. And I know it's not going to match because I have done a bunch of stuff to this neckline. So I'm going to start with this half. This is a half of the collar stand. So this is the edge. This gets sewn to neckline. Oh my God, I'm making a mess. Hold on. Neckline. And this is where the collar goes. So if you're not familiar with a collar and collar stand, let me just show you this first. So here's the collar. Okay. And the collar stand is like this. It goes on like this. So the shorter side, or if you look at it straight on, you can see that the collar stand, if I lay it flat on a line here, you can see that it picks up a little bit, like it curves slightly up, and that's to help it fit around neck, right? So this side is the side the collar goes on. This is the side that gets sewn to the neckline. And while I'm here, I'm just going to more accurately cut out the bottom of this so it's accurate like that. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my collar stand and I'm going to start it center back. Now notice I cut it in half, so there's no seam allowance here, right? Let me just get this really, I want you to be able to see what I'm doing, so let me just get it so it's pretty easy to see. So I'm going to line this up, the center back edge, with the stitching line on my pattern. I have a 3/4 inch stitching seam allowance back there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to get my KDK bag out. I don't know if I've talked about this KDK bag enough, right? I never unpack it, and I always put all of my tools back when I'm done. So I have not lost anything since I have loaded up that KDK bag with different all my different sewing tools. So very happy about that. So I'm going to use my stiletto, and I'm going to walk this collar stand along the neckline like this. And I'm walking it about 1/2 inch away from the edges, because that's where you sew it. Now when I get to the actual shoulder seam, I'm going to make a mark. So my shoulder seam is right here. Okay, so this is center back. That's my shoulder seam. Then I'm going to get my front, and I'm going to put it on the shoulder seam right here. Okay, so you can see I'm lining up the shoulder seam with the mark for the shoulder seam, and I'm going to keep going. And I'm just taking my time because I want this to fit right. All right, what mistake am I making here? Well, I'm not making a mistake, but I keep forgetting. Okay, so you have to make sure, let me just pin this on because you have to make sure you're including the button placket when you measure your, if your collar stand fits. And I forgot to put that on like I always do. Hold on. So let me just pin this in place. And I'm only going to pin it at the very top. So if I put one pin right there, and then if I fold this back on itself, like this, and then if I fold it like this, this is my finished length right here. Or the finished, well, yeah, the finished length of my actual front neckline. All right, so Mr. Karen said we drove to the, I think we drove the price up. It's definitely more expensive now, but it lasts a super long time. The roll has 75 yards, which is 2,500 inches. God knows I use a lot of tape, but that really does go far. Oh, thank you for the update, Karen. Yeah, I forget when I talk about things on my cool tools, and then people go out and buy them. Like sometimes that does happen where the price goes up or they run out of stock or whatever, but I'm just glad that that tape is back in stock because it's a really cool tape. Okay, now I have my button placket in place. So again, I'm going to start at the shoulder right here. Okay, and again, I'm going to go about a ½ inch away. And just going to keep rotating it around. All right, and now when I get to center front, where does this have to match up? You can see if I hold it right here, and I just put a little sew tight right there, I'm going to zoom in to show you where we are. All right, you can see that the tip of this almost touches that, but we really need where this green line is, which is the ½ inch seam allowance, to be over here. So that means my collar stand is, in fact, I'm just going to measure from there to there. It's an inch. Well, it might be 7/8 or an inch, between a 7/8 and an inch too short. So what I'm going to do is I am going to get my little scrap of paper back, or I'll just use this. This is fine. No, I'm going to get, what did I do? Oh, here's a scrap of paper. I'm going to stick this collar stand right here, and I'm going to use some permanent magic tape to tape this paper onto the end of here like this, and then I'm going to add an inch. So here's where the raw edge is, and so I'm going to add a full inch like this to my center back. like this. Okay, and then I'm also going to add a 1/2 inch seam allowance now, because I always like to have a 1/2 inch seam allowance so I can cut my collar stand and my collar on the bias if I want to. So this is my 1/2 inch seam allowance right there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-walk it and make sure this is correct. So I'm going to cut this out on the line. You don't know how happy I am I fixed this issue, because it was really wobbling. I feel like a ding-dong for not checking that weeks ago, to be honest with you. All right, let's try this one more time. Start in the back again. So again, I'm going to start right here. So I'm lining up my stitching, oops. I'm lining up my stitching line with my stitching line. Okay. Okay, so that puts my shoulder right here. So my shoulder's here now, not here. Okay, shoulder. Now let's do the front. Okay, so I'm going to line this up like that. Lining shoulder to stitching line to stitching line. All right, so you can see if I fold back this 1/2 inch seam allowance right here, I'm just going to fold it back like this. You can see that matches up perfectly. See, it matches perfectly. All right, so that's what you want. You want it to be matching right at this intersection, you know, right at this, you know, between here and your 1/2 inch here. You want it to be right where this purple dot is, right there, and it does match. So I'm happy with that. So now I know that my collar stand is correct. So that means, what am I going to do to fix my collar? Okay, so to fix my collar, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line it up, my center back with the center back like this. And I'm just going to go ahead and mark that. That works out to be 1.5 inches. Okay, so then we have a 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, and then I'm going to cut this out. I think it was the, well, I have 2 lines here. See how I have 2 lines? I'm just going to make sure I'm using the right one. Let me just like walk this now just to make sure, because I don't know why I have all those lines. So if it has to match at that dot, okay, so it's the green, the light blue line that's the correct line. I just wanted to make sure I'm using the right line. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. All right, and then I thought what I would do, because, you know, I thought to myself, oh, I could start cutting things out. But I think what I'm going to do instead, since my fabric is not washed yet, I'm going to cut out some muslin pieces and show you how to put together a collar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have all right, so I'm just going to, let me move this out of the way. I just want to show you how this all goes together, because this can be a little bit fun. So I've got my collar and I've got my collar stand, and maybe what we'll do is we'll just do a half. Just to show you some things. So I'm going to cut out 2 of these. You know what, actually I want to cut out the whole thing because I want to see how it looks on my muslin. I almost never do a muslin of a collar, like a shirt. I usually never add these things, but I want to, so I'm going to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out 2 of these. So here's one. Oops. I'm going to cut right on the fold there. So I've got 1 set. Oops. And let's cut out 1 more set. And so I'm just going to give you some tips for, you know, cutting out and sewing a collar and a collar stand here. So let me just cut out this one. All right, so I've got my collar and my under collar, and then I'm going to cut out a, oh, that's not going to fit that way. We're going to have to fold it this way for the, hopefully this will be longer. See if it's long enough. And of course it's not. So I'm just going to pretend, I'm going to not include the seam allowances on the collar stand because I want to use this scrap, I think. Oh, you know what? I'll cut these on the bias. No, I don't want to do that either. I'm just going to cut them out like this. And actually, I'm going to be real lazy. I'm going to cut out both sets at once. So I'm doubling my fabric here. I don't recommend doing this for an actual garment because things can slide, but for a sample, I'm just going to do it like this. Okay. All right. Okay. So now what I'm going to do here is I am going to get my sewing machine back up here. And I'm going to plug in my foot control. And I'm going to sew my, let's get this a little better angle for you guys now. Is that nice and, okay. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sew half-inch seam allowances on all 4 pieces. So my collar stand and facing, and also my collar and under collar. Like this. Okay. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut them apart. So we've got one collar stand and one collar stand facing. And then we've got our under collar and our collar. Now, what I'm going to do is first, I am going to take my, this is going to be my, under collar. This is my UC under collar. And I am going to trim off like 1/8 of an inch off the end. Just one little 1/8. Off the end there. And I'm also going to trim about 1/8 off of the top edge, not the edge that gets sewn to the collar stand, but the top edge. So see how I'm cutting off that little bit there? That's going to help the under collar stay underneath. And then I'm going to open this up. I'm going to finger press my seam because I don't have my iron on. But so for this, I'm just going to finger press my seams like that. And I'm going to put right sides together with my collar. Like this. And the collar is going to be a smudge bigger, so I'm going to just pin some edges together here. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to pin the very edge here. And then I'm going to pin the very edge up at the top here. And you're going to see there's that little bit of extra, but I can pull it to match, see? And then I'm going to pin my center backs together. And I'm going to pin on either side so I can hold the seam allowances down. And then I'm going to pin together the edges here. So basically I'm pinning the edges together where the collar is just a skosh longer than the under collar. Like that. Then we're going to sew this. Okay, so I'm going to start over here. Okay, we're just going to sew this at 1/2 inch. Okay, and I'm going to make sure I'm stretching the collar I'm stretching the undercollar, and notice I'm going to stitch all the way to the edge like this. And then I'm going to start here. And as I sew this, when I get to the intersection, I'm just going to back tack there just to secure it. And again, I'm just stretching the undercollar to match the collar. And again, I'm just going to back tack just right over that. Okay, intersection. Okay, so now I think you can see, if I show you here, like the undercollar is slightly smaller than the collar, so that's going to help it stay nice and out of sight. I am going to trim straight across here like this. And I also like to come in, like you can grade your, you know, if you wanted to grade these, especially if you were working with something heavy, you could cut one to 1/8 and one to 1/4. For this, I'm just going to come in like this. And I just want to, make sure I can get a nice point here. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm just going to cut close and then just a little bit like this, just so I can get a nice point. And then I'm going to turn this, and I have, I'm going to use my wood bodkin here. Gently gonna poke that, and then I was playing with different ways. I mean, I don't have any of my point perfect tools that I used to have because I can't find a new person to make them for me. So I'm just gonna go in here and pull out the point like this. Oops, and that'll make a nice point. And then I have my little wooden needle, which I'm also going to use. So between those two things, I can get a pretty nice point there. So let me turn this one. Okay, so I'm just coaxing it out. And then let's get the iron back up here. Oh, I don't have my iron. I'm gonna have to plug my iron in. I need my iron, actually. So let me, it's a little bit warm because I was using it before. Okay, so now what I'm going to do while I'm waiting for that to heat up is I'm going to just finger press myself up here. And when I go to press my collar, what I like to do is make sure the turn of cloth is visible on the undercollar side. Now, because I made the undercollar that little bit smaller, it's going to be real easy for me to get a nice look on this because, you know, it's already, you know, smaller. I'm just looking to see if I can find my, of course. All right, so I do have a clapper that's got a point turner, you know, pressing thing, but since I can't find that, I'm just going to do it without it. So the first thing I'm going to do is get in there and press my seam allowance flat between my collar and collar stand like this. You know, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to get as close to the point as I can. See how I'm kind of just getting in there? All right, and then when I go to press it flat, here's the under collar side. Just going to go ahead and press this, and this will get me a pretty nice shape without too much fuss and muss, because remember that collar, under collar is already in fact a little bit smaller, so it's not going to show on the right side of the collar with very little work. So now if I turn it like this, you can see how you can't see the turn of cloth. I'm going to zoom in so you can see what I mean. So let's get real close in there. So see how you cannot see it at all from the right side? And that's because we made it that little bit smaller. All right, so now this is the big question, and this is really why I wanted to show you how to put together a collar and a collar stand, because now we've got our collar, right? This is my under collar. This is my collar. Right, and then we've got our a facing, and we have a collar stand. So the collar gets sewn or sandwiched between these two pieces. So I'm going to call this one is going to be the facing, right? And this is going to be the collar stand. Okay, collar stand. Now the collar stand and the collar are public side. This is on the inside and this is on the underside, right? So we want to make sure we put them together properly. So if I were to first lay my facing down like this. Now remember, this is the side we're going to be sewing the collar to up here. Okay, this is the side the collar goes on, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my collar, the collar side face down to the facing. I'm going to pin it, and then I'm going to, no, I don't have to pin it yet. And then I'm going to put the collar stand right sides together with the under collar, okay? Under collar together with collar stand. And I'm just going to pin them together here. Okay. And the whole thing is now, I just want to show you, if I open this up, like once this is all turned to the right side like this, once it's sewn, oh, you can see I did it wrong. So this is why I'm pinning it. So if I do it that way, the collar stand is going to be on the same side as the under collar. That's wrong. Um, oh, Victoria's been cleaning her sewing room and finding all sorts of hidden treasures. I love that. All right, so here's the official way to do it. You're going to take your under collar, and let's try to think of a way to make this memorable so we don't have to guess every time. I'm going to put the under collar, the facing down first. Is that what I did? No, I'm going to put the under the collar stand first, like this. Collar stand goes with collar, and then facing goes with under collar. And then if I were to finish these, no, that's what I did before. I'm sorry. So the facing gets put down first. Facing gets put down first. I'm doing the struggle with you together so you don't have to do it yourself. Facing first, collar and facing matching, like this. And then collar stand goes next on top. So collar stand is on top, the facing is on the bottom. So now let me just flip it and make sure it's correct. So if I were to sew all these and turn them all right side out, we would then have, this is what you want to see. You want to see the facing together with the collar, because this gets turned down here and this is inside. So the official order is, I'm going to do it one more time. You put your facing down first for your collar stand. Then you put your collar side, right sides together with the facing. Then you put the collar stand, right sides together with the under collar. Collar stand and under collar go together, like this. Now we're going to pin these all together. I can't tell you how many years it's been since I've actually sewn a collar to a collar stand, so that's why I have to always remind myself it's been years. So I'm going to pin those like that, and then all these layers get pinned together like this. And what I like to do over here, sometimes it's hard to get a really nice shape to your the collar stand that wraps around to center front. So what I like to do here is I like to draw a stitching line. So if you're working on your real deal garment, you're going to want to use chalk or something that erases. But because this is a sample, I can continue to work with my Sharpie marker here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark a 1/2 inch right here. And then I'm going to mark a 1/2 inch here, like this. And I really just need to mark the curved section. So I'm gonna mark one like this. Okay. Now I know how to make a nice shape there, and I'm just going to quickly do it to the other side. I find that if I take a minute to do this, it really makes a difference in the quality of the shape of my collar stand left to right, like this. So let me just go ahead and make myself some guidelines over here too. So I start by marking the 1/2 inch on the end, and then I mark the 1/2 inch here, 1/2 inch here. This is not cheating, it's just giving you a guide. Okay, so now that I have that marked, let's sew it. Sorry, I scared myself. I dropped my pin cushion. Okay, All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew this. So let's sew through all the layers. I'm going to start here. I'm going to sew. You can see I'm going really slow because I want the shape to be nice. When I get to my center, I'm going to make sure all my seam allowances are pressed open. And again, I'm going to take it easy when I get down here. Oh, okay, so Karen is saying there are different methods of sewing a collar. I'm going to have to look into that. This is the way I've always done it, so I'm not really super familiar with other ways to do it. Oops. But I'm gonna just, that is definitely worth thinking about, Karen. Different ways to do it. All right, so now I don't want this big honkin' allowance here, so I'm going to trim my collar stand down to 1/4 inch. And I'm going through all the layers through the collar and the collar stand here too. I just don't want all this bulk. Okay. All right, so let's now turn this and see what we have. Let's get our pressing thing back up here. All right, so I'm just going to come in and I'm just pressing against the stitching here along the under collar, and then I'm going to flip it and go the other way. I really should be using my my wooden point turner clapper thing. All right, so now I'm just gonna give this a nice press. Okay, and then what I want to do is I just want to smooth out this stitching, so I'm just going to use my wooden thing to make a nice shape like this. I'm going to turn this one to get a nice shape like this. Okay, so if you look at what I have here, I've got a nice curve here, and then it kind of juts back in. That's okay, because that's the seam allowance. That's not going to show. And I like to have that little point right there showing me what lines up with the neckline. All right, so now I've got this pressed. And I will tell you what I like to do when I'm making, you know, for a collar for your actual shirt, is I also like to press my collar down like this. Again, so the turn of cloth, oops, I'm sorry. So the turn of cloth is not showing on the collar side. Okay, and then the other thing I like to do is I like to pin it to my dress form and kind of let it breathe for a little bit before I put it on, because I find that if I can get it to sit the way I want before I sew it to the shirt, then it's like it knows what it's supposed to be doing essentially. So I will pin it onto the neck of my ditto form like this and let it sit overnight before I actually attach it to my collar. So since this is just a sample though, I just want to see what it looks like. So let's just sew it on. What did I do with my... Alright, so I'm just going to quickly sew it on to see if I like it, and then if all is a go, I will be able to then start cutting out my pieces. Another thing I want to point out to you is when I'm making a real collar, I use fusible interfacing on the collar and facing pieces. I don't interface the undercollar and the collar. I'm sorry, I do the collar stand and the collar. The facing and the undercollar do not get interfaced. So that's the other thing I skipped. Now I want to put my collar stand right sides together with the right side of my shirt. So I guess what I'll do is now I'll do it so all the seams are facing in now that I'm done fitting. So I'm going to put my collar stand right sides together with the back of the shirt, center back, like this. And I'm just going to pin that. And then I'm going to come around to my center front and I'm going to line that up. Now, here's another reason why I like to do that little angle for a seam allowance. It helps me line up the center front of us. Oh yeah, so Karen's asking, for those of us who without a dress form, could you wrap a freshly ironed collar around a ham and pin? Yes, a ham, or even like you could make yourself, if you don't have this, a sleeve roll. You could put it on here too. You know, just something to give it that curved shape. All right, so what I wanted to show you here is sometimes people have trouble getting the tip of the collar stand to match with the end of the edge of the button placket. So what I want to show you here is, make sure this is nice and sharp. What I like to do is I like to take, see how I made that little angle, right? So I went straight and then I started to curve. That whole straight edge lines up with this folded edge of the placket. So see how they line up exactly? And if you're forgetting what I'm mentioning, I mean, if you're forgetting, or if you didn't catch what I did, I literally sewed straight here before I started doing this. And this is the little edge that I'm lining up here, right here, with the top of the button placket. Okay, and then the rest of the collar stand should fit. You can take the extra step of marking your shoulder seam if you want to for a notch. You know, when you're walking, after you cut it out, you can mark that if you want to. I did not do that, so I'm just gonna pin it one place between. And then I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna wrap this side around here. So again, that straight part is going to line right up with the button placket like that. So it matches exactly. That way when we turn it to the right side, it will be matching. And it won't, the collar stand will not be poking past center, you know, past center front of the, you know, past the side of the button placket, which happens sometimes. So let me just pin this. Okay, and then again, I'm just going to pin the collar stand to the neckline. And now we're going to sew it on, and then we can see how it looks. Okay. All right, so let me just sew this. Get this sewed so you can see what we're doing. Now, something else that you can do, I'm going to try it. So you can burrito method this a little bit. I lined it up. I'm gonna take this pin out for a second. I'm gonna line this up like I did before. Okay, and then I'm gonna turn the facing around to the front like this. And I'm gonna pin it like this. And I'm gonna also make sure the seam allowance is pressed up against here. Maybe I'll leave that flat. Let's leave that flat, never mind. All right, I'm gonna just go like this and pin it again. So see what I did was I did like a little burrito method. So let me just sew. So I'm literally just gonna sew across the button placket here. So you can't obviously do the whole thing like this. So I'm just gonna literally sew the first maybe inch of this. I'm gonna put another pin past where I'm gonna sew. So there's 2 pins. Oops. This makes a nice neat finish here. So I'm putting a second pin in right there so I can just put this down like this. And I'm gonna sew at a 1/2 inch. And I'm just gonna sew straight to the stitching line here. And I'm just gonna catch the actual stitching line, and then I'm gonna back up a little bit. So see, all I did was sew like that first inch, but then look what happens when you turn it around. When I pull it back out, it should make a nice, neat, let me just use my little so see how that lines up perfectly? So see if I were to lay the collar like that. So that way you finish that little bit on the inside too. So if I do it on this side, let's do it again. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap. So this is the collar stand, right sides together with the shirt right here, like this. Okay, then I'm going to wrap the other one right around, and I want to make sure that that folded edge of that button placket is nestled right in there along that edge. Okay, and then I'm gonna just put a pin right here. Okay. And then I'm gonna, let's go this way this time. So this time I'm gonna go this way, 1/2 inch into my thread. My thread is almost unthreaded. I almost lost my tail. Okay, so we're just gonna sew 1/2 inch right on the stitching line of the collar stand. And again, you only need to get literally like the first little bit. It doesn't need to be a lot. And again, I'm going to pull this out. Okay. All right, and then what I'm going to do is let me just, did I sew that right? Yeah, so see, I've got that nice transition here. So now I'm going to put the facing, I'm going to put it back around like this, turn it back inside out so I can finish stitching the neckline to the facing now. Oh, this side got screwed up. All right, so on this side over here, on this side over here, my button placket was a little bit lower than the edge of my collar stand, so I'm just gonna take that out. And I'm gonna stitch this side the traditional way so you can see the difference. So this side got screwed up. So again, I'm just gonna put this back together like this. And I'm just gonna pin it. So we'll sew one side with the burrito method, and then the other side will be, so I'm gonna leave this one like this. So we'll sew one side with the burrito method that I did, which worked out on this side. I screwed up the other side. And that way you can see the two differences. So then what you're gonna do is I'm gonna start from center back like this. I'm just gonna put that in at 1/2 inch. Now it's important that you don't catch the, you don't want to catch your facing in this stitching. This is the facing, right? So I am going to just stitch down across center in this direction. Like this. Making sure everything is nice and even. And then when I get, so basically I need to stitch on this side up to what to my burrito stitching, where my burrito stitching ended, without catching anything. It's easier to sew to that row of stitching versus trying to start there. That's why I started at center back. I just need to draw it out so I can see it. And then I'm just going to keep stitching until I get right to that spot. I'm literally just going to stop where the burrito stitching started, and I'm just going to back tack there like that. It's hard to see. And then on this side, This is the way to do it laying flat. I'm just going to stitch right along. So make sure I want to make sure I'm not catching the facing here. Okay. Now, as I get to this very end, I just want to make sure I'm not catching and actually I'm going to turn it around now so I can see. I want to get right in there, and I don't want to catch the facing, so I'm going to start on this side now. Let me just put a pin right here. Okay, and then I'm just going to stitch this side. It's always easier to see the ends with the, with the facing, with the collar pieces face up, and the neckline against the thing. And also the neckline can stretch because it's on a curve, so it's always better to have that against the feed dogs anyway. All right, let's see how I did. Okay, so if I turn this over on itself, and I'm just going to use my poker to get in there. Use my smaller poker. Okay, let me do this side. So both sides came out equally as well. I was hoping the burrito side would come out significantly better, but I was doing it this way a lot longer. The burrito method was a more recent addition to my process, so I haven't practiced with it as much as I have just lining it up without doing that. And I think you can see, if I were to press this, that has a pretty nice, that lines up pretty nicely there. And on this side where I did the burrito method, it lines up, although there's something going on with the shape of this one. I think I have to give all this a nice press. But basically, they both came out very similar, but the important thing is I just want to see how it's going to look around my neck. So let's give it a quick press, and then I will show you how it looks on, and then hopefully I could move on to I'm just going to kind of line it up like this. All right, so we definitely don't want this back seam allowance flipped a little bit, so I'm just going to clip it on this sample so it lays flat. All right, so if I'm just going to give this a little press here, I just want to get it so it's laying kind of like it's supposed to be laying. Like, the big thing is I want to see how it looks on me. Let's turn it this way so you can see how this is looking. Okay. All right, so let's just see how this looks. see if I'm happy with, mostly I just want to make sure I'm happy with the shape of this collar. So let me just put this back on. I'm going to move this out of the way. All right, and I'm just gonna, I can take this, remember I have a tank top on, don't be scared. Okay, just wanna put this back on so you can see how it looks with the collar. Color, color, color. Okay, so just get right in here so I can see. So I'm gonna fold that down and fold that into place. You know, it's really not laying. There. And then if I were to overlap, yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with my little collar. All right, so that's going to be the collar on the actual shirt. So when I make my real one, like I said, I will be letting it sit on the neck of my ditto form because we have the same neck, which is nice. But I'm glad I took the time to do all this testing and make sure I like the way all the shapes are because, yeah, I just wanted to make sure because again, this is my lovely blue. Now imagine it poofed into blue Irish linen, everyone, right? This is what I'm sewing it out of. I still have to wash this. I haven't washed it yet. My daughter came back from a week-long volleyball trip and she took over the washing machine. So anyway, I'm pretty pleased with this now. So I will have some shirts. I'm so excited. So there. So I'm going to work on my, I think I'm going to practice that burrito method a little bit more because when you get that on perfect, it really does make a nice end to the collar stand. But again, I'm not going to proclaim myself as a collar construction professional because I've probably only sewn, not very many collars. I mean, I'm not a collar button down shirt girl. I'm a knit top girl, and I'm really trying to change that. So just like I did with my bodice when I was teaching how to draft and how to fit and how to sew or design the bodice the past few months here on Fat Pit Friday, I learned a lot of things. So now I'm going to immerse myself into collar construction so I can really, really make the perfect collar. So I'll be working on that. And like, now that I have a pattern I like, I will be able to just make a bunch of different shirts. So I'm very excited. And then I will share my final collar construction tips with you after I live through the process a few more times. So this would be one of those instances where I'm not a pro at everything. I've only sewn a few collar stands and collars, but I know how to do it, but I want to perfect it. So I'll be working on that as well. So that was another reason why I wanted to do a muslin with a collar to get myself practiced up. So anyway, I hope you guys had a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. And I still have the link if anyone wants printed patterns for 30% off. That link is still down there and it's still going on because I still have a few patterns left for my new covers. So if anyone's interested in printed patterns on sale, check the link below. There are two spots left in my Lansing, Michigan 3-day pants fitting class in July on the 17th, 18th, and 19th. So if anyone wants to join me for that, there are 2 spots left. And that's what I got for right now. So hope you guys have a great weekend. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for hanging out with me. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And I hope you have a happy weekend. All right. Bye.